status of the sidewalk was, and nothing was happening, and then all of a sudden one day it was built. And so this is, this was such this happened in such a small timeline, which I think is kind of rare for lots of projects, but really it's just so helpful again to have the story and really get allies, work with neighborhood groups, and if you don't have a connection inside SDOT, that's where you really work with your council members and work with their legislative aides, and make sure it's on somebody's radar who's on the inside and can really help navigate that final stage of the process. So we really, have two examples of a small project, a larger multi-stage project, and we really want to make this session interactive because I know that some of you know projects that need to happen or that are in the planning process, but also there's so many other organizers and advocates in this space that bring a lot of knowledge too. And so we want to really walk through ideas of a project that should happen or might happen. And so, does anybody have an idea of the project? Yes.
I just wanted to say I actually worked on that project towards the end of it, and it's just really cool to hear the backstory behind it. So thanks for sharing.
Yeah. What's really interesting? I guess we can go to the last.
I think this is the last one.
Or the next redlet. I did not describe any of these images, but this is the ribbon cutting ceremony that I am awkwardly, every single photo, there's a photo of me in the corner taking a photo. And I was trying so hard to cut it out. But again, just the power of a story. At this ribbon cutting ceremony, there was every single state representative, Representative Barbar, Representative Valdez was there, Councilmember Juarez was there, who was very tied to this project. Councilmember Strauss was there, and so it was. People really, gravitated for this project, and it was interesting to see how many people showed up to participate in the victory of this sidewalk case. But it was a pretty amazing story. And again, it was organized, and it was really, truly driven by Charlie, who was in high school at that time. And that's, I can't emphasize that enough. This wasn't a Disparate Washington campaign. It was really Charlie's campaign. He, found good allies to work with.
I think it's also great evidence that politicians love ribbon cuttings. They really love it. So if you can give them that opportunity, they will champion the project. Most likely.
That's something we should have been doing in the first place.
Yeah, and also Councilmember Moore was there, and this was right when SDOT was about to get finalized. And so really tied on to her and grilled her about what should be in SDOT for sidewalks. And she thought that in 20 years we should build all of our sidewalks. So that is now an SDP. I honestly, I don't think there's an understanding how much sidewalks cost. But, this really, use these opportunities for the next projects. This was also, as we're advocating for the levy. Use the, if council members are so excited for these 3 sidewalks, make sure they're on record of, well, what do you do for the next 11,000 sidewalks? Yes,
I'm going to try to make this as complicated for you as possible. So my favorite project, a lot of people's probably favorite project, it fits kind of between these two. It's a project that was announced and completed, and it's terrible. And so we've been providing a ton of feedback about how to fix it after the fact. So it's become a kind of a new project. And to give people context, I'm talking about Pike and Melrose.
They just mentioned it upstairs. Radcliffe said this is a project we are still working on and iterating on. They know it's bad.
We've had council on site, we've had SDOT director on site, and so they've acknowledged that it's a problem. They said they're working on it, but it's kind of this black box at this point of we don't know what they're doing, when they're doing it, if there's funding. And I think the idea they're going to come to the table with is very different than what like community have an idea for. So I'm curious what you guys would think about how to get a status update on kind of where that limbo lives, how to influence it so that we're in the 30% design phase and not stuck at the bad 60. I'm really curious to see what you guys think about something like that, where it's kind of an after-the-fact fix. It's a new project, but it's an old project.
Yeah.
I have a thought. Do you want to go first?
Yeah, right, go for it.
I think what I would say, what my guess, knowing what I know about how SDOT works internally, there's no funding to fix it because there was funding to do it, they did it, and now they would like to walk away and say, we did that, let's not talk about it for another 20 years. So with lack of funding, I've seen this many times, with lack of funding, SDOT mid-level managers, engineers and planners will often not tell the community anything officially about what could or could not happen because without funding, they don't want to be tied to saying, oh yeah, we can do this, even if they were to say, we can do this if $500,000 would appear suddenly. They don't even say that stuff. They really leave it as like, we'll take all your concerns into account, and when funding and the opportunity comes up, we can approach this and redesign it maybe. What I have found is effective when the mid-level managers aren't going to tell you anything substantial is to talk higher, whether it's the director or even the mayor, if you can get there. And often you can't get there very easily, if at all. So the next thing to do is talk with city council members. If you can, and as Cecelia mentioned, state legislators more and more are getting really into the weeds on all this stuff, which is great. And they have quite a bit of leverage they can pull as well. So getting some politicals involved can often move it forward, but you're still going to run into the same bureaucracy, which is we can't tell you anything because we're not allowed to do anything. We don't have the funding, we don't have the authority, whatever it is. So what you're getting the politicals to do is really just pressure the mayor, pressure Director Emery to do something on this project. What you can do at the grassroots level is get as many people fired up and talking to those politicals so that the politicals actually take it as priorities and champion it rather than just say, yeah, we'll send an email, we'll do what we can. Championing it is a very lengthy process, and a lot of elected leaders don't want to do that unless they can see a clear payoff. So articulating to them like what's the vision that the community has for this redesign in Melrose can be really helpful, and then articulate that to the politicals so that they can take it to heart and actually champion it for real.
And I think just follow up on that, my curiosity is funding's always an issue, and it's always an issue because they always go to the most expensive solution first. We're going to spend $1 million on a new signal when they could spend $50,000 on a diverter. So, is there a way to influence that conversation? We don't need you to spend $500,000 on a new signal. We just want you to cut through traffic so that you don't have this conflict point. You make a simple, nicer, calmer experience for everybody. You spend a tenth the amount of money.
Yeah, every time I've ever suggested the cheap solution, which is just put down a barricade in the middle of the street and stop traffic, the engineers, seriously, and that has been starting to happen more and more around the city, but it is the last resort because their job as SDOT managers is to keep traffic moving.
Mm-hmm.
So they're not going to warm up to that idea unless they're being told to. And that's where I think the politicians can come in handy. And I've noticed, especially like Councilmember Moore, as he was saying, now is a champion for sidewalks. She really is. Yeah. And she understands that sidewalks are very expensive. We're not going to build them all in 20 years. There's just no possible way. So she has now championed alternatives to sidewalks. And that's actually gotten us really far. And right now I'm working with her office on trying to reimagine the Roosevelt diagonal that goes from the future 130th Street Pinehurst Station up to Aurora at 145th. All we need, I gave her a very clear, here's a cheap way to do it right in the short term, and then long term, here's how I'm going to redesign the whole street. That'll take probably tens of millions of dollars. But short term, just do this right thing with paint and post. It's really simple. They like that. They like hearing the budget saving ideas, and they can push those from the top. The community can push it from the bottom, and hopefully between that, you can get to the cheaper solution that can happen quickly, and call it a pilot. pilots are great. They love pilots because they can just pull it back in the moment, which is crappy for us, but it actually gets things done in the short term.
I just want to open it for a second if anybody else, because I know there's like so many experts and organizers in this room. If anyone else has thoughts and ideas of how to advocate for a project that is done terribly.
I'm asking for your experience. Would standing on a dangerous corner and with a petition in your hand and a sign, and just talking to, because it's not a business situation. It's like apartment buildings and it's a high traffic area, high bus route and everything. Just trying to collect signatures and maybe doing a video audit and then sending it to somebody at SDOT. Would that work?
The question was, if just standing on a corner collecting signatures, take a video, like a walk audit, videotape it and send it to SDOT, would that help?
I think videos are just so powerful because there's just no other than being in person, it's like the best way to really understand what it would like to be there. And so I think that's a great idea. I also, find news outlets too. We, I think, have worked really hard to get more sidewalk stories in the news because I think SMG is really familiar with that. Just, a few years ago, there was a poll on the people's priorities towards sidewalks, and I think they ranked very low, and now they're one of the top priorities. I think news stories really help. And again, like having stories, and I think that's where the video clips and petitions of people that feel dangerous there. I think that's so helpful. But news can really play a really important piece. Yeah, Jeff.
I was actually going to ask about that. So, do you ever try and utilize local news when you're getting no traction with City Hall and SDOT, try and influence politicians?
Yeah, we do. We did that a lot with the levy, was just plan as many events that could really identify people with some good stories. We made, again, this was for levy, but we made sidewalk stories of people following the ramp, just people that are seniors to people that live in different parts of the city. When news media were covering a story or we're just here let's talk about the levy. We had a video clip so they could actively show, which was really, really helpful. I will just plug Week Without Driving. That's been so instrumental for developing relationships with SDOT and city council members because now in its 4th year, which Week Without Driving happens the last week of September, and that's was a big push for Demystifies Washington to get elected decision makers to try to give up a car week and just understand it's for non-drivers. That's been a really helpful place to develop those relationships. But also we've gotten so many news stories out of Week Without Driving. So I think SMG's done this a lot with Parking Day, but those events are really, really helpful, especially because I think oftentimes those create some news stories that people can come out and amplify whatever you're trying to advocate for, even if that's tie those days to a specific project or issue.
Do you have to call a local news organization and be like, hey, we're having an event, come out? Or does certain events raise to a level where they'll just come out because it's happening?
No, definitely call. Yeah, call. And at this point, we have relationships with a few reporters, but also, we've had a couple. I spent last year where I just cold emailed a pretty, I thought was a long and lengthy, boring press release, and I was just I'll have to send this out because I have no energy to do anything else personal. And we got 2 reporters to come, and it was totally changed the impact of the event. So definitely call. Also just message people, find reporters and message them on whatever social media platform they're using, but as much outreach as you can, and have a good, either have a story or just, really helpful. And you can't, I don't think you can send. I think contact news media in as many ways as possible.
I think having media is really important, but the timing is really critical. And one thing I always think about, I did grad school for public policy, and one thing we talk about a lot in public policy is the policy window. If it's open, you can get things done. If the policy window is closed, not a lot's going to happen unless you really force it open. So a policy window can open pretty quickly if the media latches onto a project idea. Media is not going to come out unless there's like a big event or something that was already newsworthy, like a collision, an injury, a fatality. So as awful as it is to say, be ready for when inevitably that collision happens, something awful happens, like we saw very recently at 4th and Pine. That is the policy window. It opens abruptly, very quickly, and there's an opportunity for change. And if you are ready with your idea, with the project idea, you can move things pretty quickly. So media definitely can help if you think about timing and what's the draw for them and what's the timing on their end. Sometimes media is really slow. There's not a lot of stories happening on like a Monday. Friday's not a good time to pitch them with a story. Because they really, well, actually that's not true. It depends on the story. Sometimes Friday's a really good time because they know there's not a lot of viewers, so they'll take kind of those leftover stories that no one cares that much about. So you can get on the news, but you're not going to get a lot of eyeballs maybe. So think about the timing. Yes.
So I have a question that could be difficult to answer, but the question is, how do you get SDOT to act with more urgency? And let me give you context. So I live on South Rainier Avenue, and we have 2 serious accidents on our stretch of the street every month. And we're not talking fender benders, we're talking major head-on collisions. And there's 3 problems. There's speed, there's absolutely literally no traffic lights or stop signs running for 2.5 miles, and there's 2 dangerous curves. And so we are actually working with the SDOT. We meet with them once a quarter. They have 15 things they're going to do, but they're basically fixing problems like the little, barriers on islands or whatever. They're not doing the bigger things. So how do you get them to act with more urgency?
I'm going to open this up to
Does anyone need help? I wish I knew.
We'll have ideas.
Can I just ask you to repeat what was the
Oh, sorry. The question was, how do we get SDOT to act with urgency, especially like in a place like South Rainier where there's accidents monthly, collisions monthly. They'll do some projects that aren't addressing the kind of foundational issues with the street design.
What was the specific intersection that you said?
There's like a 2-mile stretch on Rainier Avenue South near Stonehouse Cafe, and we're seeing 2 serious accidents a month. And so they're doing little things. They're fixing problems that needed to be, like they took away, I think it was 5,000 pounds of debris last year that was covered in sidewalks. So they're doing things like that. That's just like, it's important, but it's like they're just solving a problem that should have been solved years ago, and they're not doing the bigger things. So how do you get them to act with more urgency?
I am involved with Aurora, so with Aurora's Magic Coalition, and on Aurora's same issue, there's collisions at least every month in some stretch of it, and we are desperately trying to get SDOT to act with urgency, and instead we're just mired in a, what's now, 3-year ongoing planning process that really has no end in sight. I don't know how to get them to act with urgency, but I do know how to get politicians fired up, and that's what we've done for the last few years, and that is the most pressure that I think we can put on the mayor and Director Emery, is to get the media involved, get the local electeds involved, so that we can push from all sides. Because the urgency only comes when they're told to act urgently. An example of this, actually, there was a spate of shootings at 101st and Aurora last year, and the neighbors had been organized for a while, but organized quite a bit, got a lot of footage, again, videos, very, very powerful, and shared that with the media, and it was on media for like a month straight, news channels covering all the shootouts. And finally, one morning after another round of shootings and footage was sent directly to the mayor, Deputy Mayor Tim Burgess just called up then Director Spots of SDOT and said, do something, close it down right now. And they did, 10 a.m. that morning. He woke up at 7 a.m., gave the call, 10 a.m., there were blocks closing 101st to traffic. So it's possible to act with urgency, but it won't happen until someone up there in the mayor's office tells them to do it. And then they'll do it. We'll have to.
You had a question, comment?
Yeah, very much in line with her point. And I don't know, are there some SDOT representatives among the group here today? Tom, you would know the intersection I'm speaking about because North Green Lake Drive, it's that diagonal street that comes down from 83rd to meet the outer loop. And it's a tricky street because it's a very wide arterial and it has the bike lanes between parked cars and the curb that create tricky sight lines for the intersection of Green Lake Drive and Ashworth. And since that was constructed, that geometry has, along with GPS navigational maps and vehicles now, has created a nightmare for those two short blocks of narrow residential streets that have one lane of travel with two-way traffic. And that intersection at 80th and Ashworth and the one at Green Lake Drive, for the 5 years prior, had, I think, 4 collisions, and the 5 years since has had 14 collisions, and that's just what I've reported with Washington State Patrol. Neighbors had, for 4 years, have been complaining to SDOT. SDOT just says, oh, it's a seasonal thing, people attending the lake. You know, no, it's not, it's every day. And they they treat people dismissively, and they just don't listen. But then a crew shows up early March to paint out, to do some paint bulb work. They mark it out with spray paint, and neighbors came out and looked at what they're doing and asked them what they're doing. They said, well, this will make it safer. Oh, you told us there was no safety problem. well, this will square things up and make the crossing safer. And the two 80-year-old women who were looking at it, who watch it every day, and the other woman who has a 3rd-floor apartment with an aerial view of it, they all told the guy, no, it's going to make it worse. And immediately it made it worse, and there were immediately a couple of collisions as a result of what they did. And I saw what they did, painted out, and I said, I'll take a bus down, I'll try to meet with SDOT. You go downtown to SDOT, go to the city building, try to meet with someone. I said, I'm sitting in the lobby. I will wait down here to see the work order and would like to just speak with the project manager and see if we can stop the work. Please don't lay down the thermoplastic and put up the posts, because what you're planning to do is not going to help. And by the time I got home on the bus at 1 o'clock, they'd already put the stuff down. And it has made it worse for the last 2 months. But you can't get in, but to try to get information, I've had to submit a Seattle Public Records request and wait till the end of May. I still haven't gotten
The struggle is real.
the records. It's just ridiculous to just get simple. But we did finally get through. We have got the hardened center line on 80th, just installed 2 days ago. But anyway, why is it that hard to get SDOT to listen to people?
I don't know.
It's a rogue agency. I'm sorry. It's a rogue agency.
Thanks, everyone. Happy to answer your questions very much.
Sorry to get long-winded there, but thank you.
Let's all give
I hear you.
Cecelia a big